Part 44. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiaorong. Chapter 432. Chapter 430 of the main text volume of Ruyi Little Man, Mr. Tang is so powerful. Third update. Tang Ning strode in from outside the hospital. This is the Department of War. He is the doctor of the Department of War. Although it is only temporary, if these guys cause trouble here, he will lose face. The sudden scolding caused everyone to pause for a moment. Tang Ning came over, helped Wu Langzhong up, and asked, "Are you okay?" Wu Langzhong covered his nose, with a touch of emotion in his eyes, and said, "I'm fine." "Master Tang, go and ask Nai Shilang to come over. Only Nai Shilang can calm them down." "Nai Qian," someone glanced at him and said disdainfully, "Nai Qian can only play with his pen now, who else is he trying to control?" Tang Ning let go of Wu Langzhong, turned to look at these people, and said, "This is the Department of War. I don't care what your status is. Just be honest here." The rugged man who almost started a fight just now looked at him and asked, "Who are you?" Dr. Wu immediately introduced, "This is the new Dr. Tang." The rugged man looked at Tang Ning, laughed loudly, and said, "There is really no one left in the Ministry of War. If the hair in your crotch has grown even, little guy, let's learn from others and become a doctor in the Ministry of War. Aren't you convinced?" Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Aren't you convinced by Bibi?" Wu Langzhong was stunned for a moment and immediately said, "Master Tang, don't be impulsive, don't be impulsive. Bibi, you want to compete with me?" The man was also startled, then he looked at the people around him and laughed, "Did you hear that? He wants to compete with me." Tang Ning looked at him and said calmly, "Why, you don't dare. I'll give you 3 punches first." The man hammered his chest and said, "Come on, hit me here. If I snort, I lose." His body is extremely burly, and standing there, you can feel the strong physique under the armor. In comparison, Tang Ning can only be regarded as having thinner arms and legs. This was obviously a naked humiliation. The officials of the Ministry of War had a look of humiliation on their faces. Many captains of the 16th Guards looked at the scene with interest, obviously waiting to see a joke. 3 punches are 3 punches. Tang Ning smiled and said, "Stand still." "Hurry up." The man waved his hand and said, "You are not like a man when you are grinding." "What's the hurry?" Tang Ning glanced at him, made a fist with her right hand, and hit the man's chest casually. Boom. It seemed like just a random blow, but it made a dull sound, and the man's body flew backwards. He fell to the ground, and he was a little dazed. After struggling twice, he managed to get up. This was still the case when Tang Ning was holding back. He was practicing internal martial arts. If he had hit him in the chest with all his strength, the blow just now would have been enough to kill him. Wu Langzhong and the officials of the Ministry of War were already stunned on the spot. They had never seen a scene where a person was knocked away with a light punch. The others looked at the man lying on the ground in surprise, with expressions of disbelief on their faces. 2 more punches left. Tang Ning walked over, looked at the man condescendingly, and asked, "Are you coming again?" The man was covering his chest with a look of fear on his face. Naturally, he could feel that Tang Ning had not used all her strength just now. Even so, he could not resist it. If another punch came, he might not be able to get up. He immediately said, "No coming, not coming." Someone looked at the man and couldn't help but said, "Wei Datu, can you do it? A boy with no hair even grew intimidated you." The man rubbed his chest and said loudly, Your mother, do it yourself if you can." Tang Ning stood in front of the yamen, faced them and stretched out her hand, saying, "How about you all come together?" Arrogant. The captains of the 16th Guards only saw the word arrogance on his face. Even Wei Lauer, who just threatened to punch him 3 times, was not as arrogant as him. As a general of the Forbidden Army, he was looked down upon by a hairless young man in the Ministry of War. This was the greatest insult to them. However, his punch just now made them deeply realize that the seemingly frail doctor of the Ministry of War did not seem to be that weak. At this moment, Tang Ning was not arrogant in the eyes of everyone in the Ministry of War, especially Wu Langzhong. Domineering. The Ministry of War has to deal with people like the 16th Guards countless times every year, and they have long been dissatisfied with their actions. This time, Dr. Tang was very angry on their behalf. Although Tang Ning was arrogant enough, the dozen or so people did not rush forward. One person came out and said, "I'll ask you for advice first." As soon as he finished speaking, he clenched his hands and rushed forward. However, when he raised his arm and punched, he realized that there was no one in front of him. Careful! The reminder from behind made the hairs on his body stand up, but before he could make any move, he felt a pain in his neck, his vision turned black, and he fell to the ground. Tang Ning knocked out the captain with a knife, but she felt no sense of accomplishment at all. He often hangs out with Tang Yaoyao, Su Mei, and Li Tianlan, and there are masters like Lao Zheng and perverts like the old beggar around him. No matter how much he improves, he still can't beat anyone. After sparring with Tang Yaoyao several times, I miss little Maniu who has returned to the grassland even more. But it's different outside. If he can't even deal with a few guys with brute force, how can he cope with the abuse he has suffered in the past 2 years and the blow to his self-confidence? People should not be judged by their appearance. As soon as they met, two people lost their fighting ability. This doctor from the Ministry of War was obviously very skilled, far superior to them. It was related to the dignity of the Forbidden Army. The leader looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Come together." When everyone gathered around Tang Ning, the officials of the Ministry of War immediately broke into an uproar. A dozen or so are beating each other. Are you all so shameless in the Imperial Army? Master Tang, be careful. Master Tang, there is someone behind who wants to attack. Everyone spoke up to remind Tang Ning, but the reminder soon turned into cheers. Master Tang beat them hard. Lord Tang is mighty. One fight against 14, Tang Ning was actually quite stressed. If they were not bare-handed but armed with weapons, if that was the case, he would not have been so arrogant just now. The training in the army was mostly about physical fitness. He faced a dozen well-trained elite soldiers and could only escape. However, these people had no brute strength and could not cooperate at all. He dealt with them. On the contrary, it was easy to do. Soon, more than 10 people were lying on the ground. It was not that they couldn't get up, but they didn't dare to get up. The opponent's attack was very heavy, and it was not easy to hit him with a punch. Tang Ning stretched her muscles and asked, "Is anyone still dissatisfied?" No one said a word. These Imperial Army captains were like eggplants beaten by frost, with their heads lowered and their faces full of shame. A dozen people beat up one person, and he was taken over by someone at the same time. If this incident spreads, the face of the 16th Guards will be really humiliated, and they will not be able to hold their heads high in this military department in the future. Since no one is dissatisfied, Tang Ning stepped forward and said, "Can we sit down and talk now?" As soon as he finished speaking, a figure strode in from the door. Nai Qian, the left minister of the Ministry of War, heard that the 16th Guard and Wu Langzhong had a quarrel over the drawing of lots, and rushed over immediately. Stepping into the yard, looking at the mess all over the ground of the Ministry of War, and then looking at the captain of the Imperial Army lying on the ground, Nai Qian was startled and said angrily, "You dare to fight in the Ministry of War, who do you think my Ministry of War is?" Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 433. The text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun Chapter 431 New competition system inside the Yamen of the Ministry of War. Nai Qian, the Minister of War, looked at Tang Ning with surprise and shock. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he really couldn't believe that the 16 Imperial Guards were no match for Tang Ning. He had too many halos on him, the top scholar in the Imperial examination, the 6 ministries, the nemesis of ministers, but no matter which one, he was still a scholar, and the impression given by scholars was nothing more than Wu Langzhong, who was weak and timid, and tried to reason with people first when encountering things. It was the first time that Nijian met a scholar who used fists to reason with people first. Although he didn't look weak, he didn't look brave and mighty. Nijian looked at the 16 guards who stood obediently by the side, and thought that if he wanted to make these people quiet, fists would be more useful. Tang Ning sat in his seat, took a sip of tea, and said, "Minister Nai, what they said is actually not without reason. The 16 guards competition is held only once every 4 years. His Majesty and the court attach great importance to it. Such a competition system is unfair and a bit hasty. The 16 guards competition has always adopted a single elimination tournament, with the order of the competition determined by drawing lots, and there is no measure to avoid strong teams from meeting each other. For some strong teams, it is very unfair. In the end, the ranking of the knockout round after the champion is determined based on the performance on the field, which is really too hasty. Put yourself in their shoes and think about it. If Tang Ning was the captain of the Yulin Guard, he would also have opinions on this competition system. The captain of the 16 guards was also stunned to see that Tang Ning actually spoke for them. If they had known that they could have a good talk, why did they have to take that beating first? Nijian looked at Tang Ning with an awkward expression, and said, "Master Tang, you don't know that if we let each of the 16 guards compete, we will have to compete at least 100 times. We don't have that much time, nor can we invest that much manpower and material resources. The elimination system has its disadvantages, and the round-robin system also has its disadvantages. Although the round-robin system is relatively fair, its disadvantage is that there are too many games to be played. If the 16 guards really want to compete against each other, they will need to compete 120 games, and they will not be finished until the end of next year. Similar competitions can completely apply the rules of later generations. The first round is a round-robin, and then cross-elimination, which can ensure fairness and a reasonable number of games. What do you think of this, Minister Nai?" Tang Ning thought for a moment, looked at Nijian and said, "We can first divide the 16 guards into 4 groups, A, B, C, and D. The left and right Yulin guards and the left and right Jinyu guards are divided into these 4 groups. There are 4 guards in each of the 4 groups. Let these 4 guards compete against each other first. Each game counts points. Winning counts 2 points, losing counts 1 point, and giving up counts 0 points. The 2 guards with the highest scores in each group advance." Having watched many football games, Tang Ning is also very familiar with this competition system. The group stage can be organized by the 16 guards themselves, and only 8 guards will be left in the end. The Ministry of War will organize the semi-finals and finals. In total, the Ministry of War can hold a maximum of 12 games, which is less than the number of knockout matches. Before Nijian finished listening to Tang Ning's description, his eyes began to light up. The encounter between the strong has always been the most resisted thing for the 16 guards. If the strongest left and right Yulin guards and the left and right Jinyu guards are separated, the problem of letting the 2 strong meet at the beginning is avoided. This method is also fair to the other 12 guards. If they are really strong, they can also defeat the strong teams in the group and win. According to the ranking of scores, it is reasonable and well-founded, and no one will be dissatisfied. The 16 guards were also listening. Tang Ning's explanation was easy to understand, and they all understood it. The more people listened, the angrier they were. The Ministry of War had such a good idea, why didn't it come out earlier? If it had come out earlier, wouldn't they have to be beaten? In this way, the Ministry of War only needs to organize 12 competitions to determine the ranking of the 8 guards, and the remaining 8 guards will be ranked according to the points. After Tang Ning finished speaking, he looked at Naijian and asked, "What do you think of this method, Minister Nai?" "This method is very good." Naijian looked at him and said, "However, this matter still needs to wait until the Shangshu comes back before making a decision." Tang Ning just made a suggestion casually. Whether it is adopted or not has nothing to do with him. He put down the teacup, looked at the dozen officers still in the room, and asked, "Would you like to stay for a cup of tea, or rest for a while, and then compete again?" "No, no. We have something important to do, goodbye." "Goodbye, goodbye." Everyone had no face to stay any longer, and left the room impatiently. Tang Ning looked at the room that suddenly became bright, and even his mood improved a lot. Lao Zheng leaned against the door and asked, "Do you think the officers in the army are just like this?" Tang Ning could not deny that these officers still had a lot of shortcomings in their personal strength. In the eyes of people who had practiced martial arts, they were just rough men with a few strengths. Old Zheng said calmly, "Generals in the army are never the ones who charge into battle. If you pick out one of those people and give them 10 people to command, you will not be their opponent." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "How do you know so much about these things?" Old Zheng said calmly, "I used to kill pigs in the army and saw some battles. Killing pigs can make you a world-class person. It is true that there are top talents in all 360 professions. Old Zheng should be a rare genius in the pig-killing world in a century." When Tang Ning was waiting for the dismissal of the military department, the Minister of War Lu Ding returned to the Yamen with a tired face. Just now in the palace, several generals of the 16th Guards expressed their dissatisfaction with the competition arranged by the Ministry of War. Even His Majesty was persuaded by them and ordered him to improve the competition system. The competition system of the 16th Guards competition has been continued. It has been more than 10 years, and now it is only 2 months before the competition. How to change it? While he was hesitating about this matter in the room, Naijian walked in from outside the door. "Sir, regarding the 16th Guards competition." Lu Ding waved his hand and said, "Don't mention this matter now. I have a headache when I hear the word 16th Guards." Naijian was stunned for a moment and then said, "Sir, Master Tang just put forward some ideas about the 16th Guards competition." Hearing Tang Ning's name, Lu Ding perked up slightly and said, "Tell me about it." After all, as the top 3 scholar, there are few people in Chen State who are smarter than him, so he still needs to listen to his ideas. Naijian said, "Master Tang means to divide the 16 guards into 4 groups according to their strength." He briefly repeated what Tang Ning had just said, and finally said, "This will save the Ministry of War a lot of trouble. Each of the 16 guards will win based on their strength, and there will be no objections." After Naijian finished speaking, Lu Ding probably understood. He stood up and exclaimed, "How on earth does this Tang boy's head grow? This method is good. Everyone relies on their strength. If you lose, you can't blame others. Just use this method to block it, shut their mouths." He looked at Naijian and said, "Go find him. Since he proposed this method, why not let him do it?" Naijian returned to the Department of War and saw that there was only Wu Langzhong in the duty room. He looked around and asked, "Where is Mr. Tang?" Wu Langzhong raised his head and said, "As soon as the gong sounds, Mr. Tang will leave." Tang Ning has always maintained a good habit of going to work and leaving get off work on time. It has to be said that Chen Guo's civil servant benefits are quite good. Although she needs to get up early in the morning, she can go home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there is still a lot of time at her disposal. Only when he got home did he find that Zhao Yuan was here again. Before the peach blossom disaster was eliminated, he seemed to have regarded the Tang family as his refuge. "Those little girls are so difficult to understand." He sat next to Tang Ning, confiding his bitterness to him, and sighed, why can't they live in harmony? As if he remembered something, he suddenly looked at Tang Ning and asked, Sir, how did you let the two master wives and those beautiful sisters live in harmony? Tang Ning was stunned and asked, what pretty lady? Zhao Yuan looked forward and saw Tang Yao Yao flying over from the wall. Their business is now on the right track. Tang Grenzai is no longer just the name of the largest bookstore in the capital, but a brand. Under this brand, it also involves many industries. When your career enters a regular stage, it will naturally enter a stage of steady development, with the growth rate becoming slower than before. Tang Yao Yao is not satisfied with this and thinks this is her problem. She has been very distressed recently. Tang Ning looked at her and comforted her, this is normal. For many stores, the market in Jingxi has reached saturation. If they want to make a breakthrough, they will have to find new business opportunities. Absently, Zhao Yuan suddenly raised his head and asked, what chicken? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 434. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Zhao Yuan held up a chicken leg and nodded. Tang Yao Yao looked at Tang Ning and asked, have you found a new business opportunity? Tang Ning has always felt that you can't make enough money, you just have to spend it, but Tang Yaja has always maintained a high enthusiasm for making money. This may be something that comes from the bones of her Tang family. No wonder the Tang family's business is doing so well. Big. Tang Ning looked at her and said, the 16th guards competition is coming soon. You can place your bets. The bookmakers will definitely give you a handicap when the time comes. Tang Yajing is known as the god of gambling. He won nearly 1 million taels of silver through gambling because Tang Ning won the first prize in the exam. Nothing can make money faster than this. Gambling is risky. Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked, aren't you in the Ministry of War? Do you have any inside stories? Unexpectedly, Tang Yajing, who had always been unconventional in her work, had become diligent and thrifty. Tang Ning was surprised by this improvement. However, the Ministry of War only has the right to host the 16th Guards competition, and it is a thankless task. There is no inside story or secret dealing, unless he poisons the food of a strong team and bets on another weak team. To win, their food is controlled by the Ministry of War anyway, so this method is very feasible. But doing this is too demeaning. It is not what a gentleman does, and the money earned is not clean. The most important thing is that it is risky. It is better to cultivate a weak team as a dark horse, but Tang Ning does not belong to the 16th Guards. The idea is not feasible at all. This matter can be put aside for a while. As the organizer, even if the Ministry of War does not have any secrets or shady secrets, there will definitely be some inside information. It seems that Wu Langzhong is in charge of the preparations for the competition. Just ask him when the time comes. Xiaoju has been running here every day recently. After walking in quickly from the door, he looked at Tang Ning and asked, I heard that you beat the 16th Guards captain today. Tang Ning looked at the bruises on his face and asked, what's wrong with your face? Xiaoju touched his face and said, it's nothing, I touched it accidentally. It's not easy to show off one's face with bruises and bruises. Tang Ning did not continue to ask questions and nodded, the Ministry of War is not their military. I just taught them a lesson and told them not to be too presumptuous. How did you know about this, How do I know? Xiaoju glanced at him and said, everyone in the capital knows that the 16th Guards colonel was beaten at the Ministry of War. 16 people could not beat one, and no face was left at all. Tang Ning's previous fame in the capital was mostly due to his being the top 3 scholar. Of course, the next scientific examination is coming soon, and his status as the top scholar is gradually not mentioned by people, but when it comes to broom stars, the nemesis of the minister is, it can be said that no one knows it, no one knows it. Being famous for beating people may not be a bad thing for him. A record of 16-1 is much better than a broom star. Tang Ning looked at Xiao Ju and asked, "Why are you here at this time today? You should be on duty today, right?" Xiao Ju waved his hand and said, "After today, I will no longer be in the Yuya Guard. I am now the Zhou Xiao cavalry colonel. Emperor Chen has taken good care of the Xiao family. Xiao Ju has been promoted to the rank of Zioqi Zioei after only 1 year as the captain of Yulin. Although Zioqi Wei is not as good as Yulin Wei, the Zioqi Zioei is a 6th grade military officer. Xiao Ju it only took 1 year to reach a full level. It's a pity that he was exhausted from running around in the 6 departments, catching corrupt officials and eliminating sycophants. In the middle of the journey, he even went all the way to Chu State. He was in danger many times and was only promoted to 1 level. As for young Master Xiao, he only lived in the capital for a year. This is the difference between the emperor's brother-in-law and ordinary people." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "For no reason, why did His Majesty ask you to join the cavalry guard?" Xiao Ju explained, "My father used to be the general of the night cavalry guard, and many of his subordinates were in the night cavalry guard. Those of us will train in the Feather Forest Guard at the beginning, and after 2 or 3 years, we will be transferred to the other 12 Wei. By the way, I am in charge of Zhou Ziokai Wei's competition this time." "Are you responsible?" Tang Ning looked at him, thought of something, and asked, "How strong is Zhou Xiao's cavalry guard?" Xiao Ju said, "It's not bad." "Where did last year's Xiao Bai rank among the 16 guards?" 15th. 15th, Tang Ning's eyes lit up and she nodded, 15th is good. Xiao Ju looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Tang Ning did not answer him directly, but looked at Xiao Ju and asked, "Do you want to get rich?" Xiao Ju shook his head and said, "No, I have enough money." Tang Ning asked again, "You really don't want to?" "No." Xiao Ju only said one word before Tang Ning stuffed a chicken drumstick into his mouth. Tang Ning looked at him, shook her head and said, "No, you think." "Master Tang." "Hello, Mr. Tang." "Mr. Tang, morning." When Tang Ning returned to the Ministry of War, she was treated completely differently from the previous 2 days. When he first came to the Ministry of War, all the officials in the Ministry of War avoided him, but today they became particularly eager. Officials he knew and didn't know took the initiative to say hello to him. On the way to the Bingbu Yamen to check in, all I heard was his brilliant record yesterday. Yesterday, the 16th Guards lost face, and the Bingbu was proud. The officials of the Bingbu were both prosperous and devastated. His attitude towards him has also undergone earth-shaking changes. In addition, he heard another piece of news. There was more than one violent incident yesterday. It is said that in a certain restaurant yesterday, someone saw the daughter of Lord Shangshu, Miss Lu, who is very famous in the capital, attacking someone in public. The reason for the attack seemed to be that the other party insulted Lu. The eldest lady said that she would never be able to get married, which touched the back of Miss Lu. Everyone expressed pity for the beautiful but hot-tempered Miss Lu, and pity for Xiao who dared to reveal the witch's reverse scale. Tang Ning stood in the corridor for a while and listened to the gossip before returning to her room. As soon as he sat down, he saw Lu Ding walking in from outside. Tang Ning stood up, cupped her hands and said, "Master Shangshu." "You're welcome." Lu Ding waved his hand and said, "I'm here to ask you for something." Tang Ning said, "Master Lu, please tell me what it is." Lu Ding said, "I think the new system for the 16th Guards competition you proposed yesterday is very good. It is not only fair, but the pressure on our military department is also much less." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Master Lu, what do you mean?" "My intention is that since this method was proposed by you, you will be responsible for the preparations for this 16th Guards competition. After all, no one is more familiar with this new system than you. When Lu Ding said this, he was still a little embarrassed. After all, this kind of thing has always been thankless. Not only is it unprofitable, but if something is not done well, the 16th Guards will blame him. Those involved in this matter, even within the Ministry of War, blame each other every year. On the way here, Tang Ning was still thinking that there were too many things that could be done in the 16th Guards competition held every 4 years. Unfortunately, he was not in charge and could not seize the business opportunities. Unexpectedly, as soon as he arrived at the Ministry of War, Lu Ding with this opportunity was presented to me. He thought for a while, looked at Wu Langzhong on the side, and said, Wu Langzhong is in charge of this year's competition. In this case, I am not stealing Wu Langzhong's job. Isn't that bad? Okay, Wu Langzhong was stunned for a moment, then stood up immediately and said, I am worried that if I can't handle this matter well, I will betray Lu Shangshu's trust. Mr. Tang, those who can do more work, I have no objection at all. In this case, I have no choice but to obey my order. Tang Ning sighed, looked at Lu Ding, and asked, I don't know the cost of this competition. Lu Ding looked slightly embarrassed and said, the funds of the Ministry of War have always been tight. The 16th Guards Palace will not allocate funds in previous years. The Ministry of War can only provide 1,000 taels. Funding issues are also one of the problems encountered by the Ministry of War. For the 16th Guards competition, the Imperial Court never allocated funds, and the Ministry of War could only fund itself. For the Ministry of War, which is already tight on funds, it is impossible to spend too much money to prepare. Tang Ning looked troubled and said, Mr. Lu, you also know that the 16th Guards competition requires a lot of manpower and material resources. These 1,000 taels. Wanting the horse to run but not giving the horse hay are completely contradictory things. Lu Ding looked at him and said, the Ministry of War can provide up to 2,000 taels, no more. Tang Ning looked at him, sighed, and said, in that case, let me give it a try. Seeing that he agreed, Lu Ding breathed a sigh of relief, encouraged him a few more words, and then left in a hurry. When he returned to his yamen, he picked up the teacup, but did not drink it, with a look of hesitation on his face. No one was willing to do a thankless task. He thought it would take a lot of effort to persuade Tang Ning, but he didn't expect it to be so easy. It was so easy that he began to doubt himself. Is there any problem in this? After thinking for a long time, he didn't think of anything wrong. He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. In any case, this difficult matter was finally settled. In the Ministry of War Yamen, Tang Ning, who had already won the right to host the 16th Guards competition, had just sat back down in her seat. He wants to write a plan. A planning document on the first Tang Grand Cup 16 Guards Championship. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 435. The 433rd chapter of the main text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun, do whatever you want. The planning of the 16 Guards competition was a piece of cake for Tang Ning. The Ministry of War was responsible for the small and large competitions in previous years. Although there was no ready-made plan, there was a general format. He only needed to fill his content into this framework. The biggest problem was that the 2,000 taels of silver given by the Ministry of War were not enough to buy prizes, let alone the venue usage fee, reconstruction fee, labor fee, mental damage fee, etc. In the past, the competitions were all held in the military camp outside the city, but since Lu Ding gave him this task, Tang Ning naturally couldn't fool around. The choice of the venue needed to be exquisite, and the audience seats had to be built neatly, so that the ticket fee could be collected higher. However, all of these required silver. Tang Ning didn't lack this little money, but the public and private affairs had to be clearly distinguished. The 16 guards competition was the business of the Ministry of War, so naturally the Tang family's money couldn't be used. As the organizer of the competition, Tang Grenzai needs to invest some money in the early stage, and Tang Ning needs to discuss this matter with the boss lady Tang Yao Yao. Before Tang Ning finished listening to Tang Yao Yao, she frowned and asked, "Why do we have to pay for the Ministry of War?" Tang Ning explained, "This is just the initial investment. I guarantee that the return in the future will be 10 times or 100 times of these investments. This is an investment." Tang Yajing used to be very generous and never asked where the money went. Since the two of them opened a store together, it has not been easy for him to get money from Tang Yajing. The reason must convince her. Tang Yao Yao thought for a moment and said, "I don't see any return on this investment." Tang Ning looked at her and said sincerely, "When have I ever lied to you?" Tang Yao Yao looked at him and said, 2 years ago, you lied to me that you wouldn't attract bees and butterflies when you came to the capital. Half a year ago, you lied to me that you wouldn't mess around when you went to Chu. Do you still dare to say that you haven't lied to me?" Tang Ning was speechless. Tang Yao Yao looked at him and said angrily, "Only ghosts would believe what you men say." Although she said so, she still agreed to let Tang Renzai host the 16 Guards Championship. This is Tang Yajing, who says one thing and means another, is hard on the outside but soft on the inside, and never refuses Tang Ning's request. "It's not enough to finalize this matter, we need to find some other sponsors." Tang Ning looked at Tang Yao Yao and asked, "Is your father home?" "Yes." Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked, "Do you have something to do with my father?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "Something." Tang Yao Yao was surprised and said, "Aren't you always avoiding him?" "That's strange." "Why would I avoid him?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "I don't owe him money or steal his daughter." Compared with the wealthy and powerful Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao were like nouveau riche. Anyway, he had a lot of money. Who else would he cut if not him? Tang Yao Yao frowned. Who to steal from? It doesn't matter who to steal from. Tang Ning waved his hand and said, let's go find your father and cheat him, for some money." Tang Ning and Tang Yao Yao walked in from the gate. Tang Yao Yao turned his head and looked at him and asked, "You want to get money from my father? It's impossible." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "How about we make a bet?" "Bet?" Tang Yao Yao glanced at him and asked, "What bet?" "If I get money from your father, you have to do something for me." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "On the contrary, you can ask me to do something." Tang Yao Yao asked, "What is it?" Tang Ning said, "As long as it does not violate morality, it can be anything." "Okay." Tang Yao Yao thought for a while, stretched out his hand, slapped his palm together, and said, "It's a deal." Tang's house, in the main house. Tang Ji was flipping through an account book in his hand. It was the end of the year. This account book recorded the profits and losses of the Tang family's industry in the capital this year. He flipped through it casually, looking a little unhappy, and said, "This year's profit has actually decreased compared to last year. Who is in charge of the capital?" The old housekeeper stood in front of him and said, "It's Lao Su." He said, and then added, "But sir, you can't blame Lao Su for this matter. The capital is different from Lingzhou. The business here is extremely prosperous and the competition is fierce. New variables will appear every few months. We have to compete with other merchants. It is common for profits to fluctuate every year." Mr. Tang turned a new page and did not delve into it. He also knew in his heart that the traditional industries run by the Tang family, such as silk shops, pawn shops, grain shops, restaurants, and inns, in the capital, where there are pawn shops, then this street is full of pawn shops, where there are restaurants, this street is also full of restaurants. It is not easy to stand out from so many competitors and take the lead. Unless they are like Tang Grenzai, which has the advantage of content among all bookstores and cannot be copied by others, their books, including the derivative peripheral products, are protected by copyright law. If anyone dares to use them without authorization, the fine from the Imperial College alone will bankrupt them. Tang Ji stroked the short beard on his chin. He didn't know where this rascal came up with this vicious trick, which directly cut off the way for others to copy. At this time, a servant came in and said, "Master, Mr. Tang and Miss are here." Hearing this, Tang Ji panicked and asked, "Are they here together? Last time he overheard Xiu and his daughter discussing something, there's no rush now, even Xiao Wu can't be ranked." And so on. Since then, his heart has been hanging on him. How could he, Tang Ji's daughter, be someone else's mistress and still ask for it? The servant looked at rich man Tang, whose expression changed, nodded in surprise, and said, "We came here together." After he finished speaking, Tang Yao Yao walked in from the outside, looked at rich man Tang and said, "Dad, we have something to discuss with you." Rich man Tang stood up subconsciously and said, "No." Tang Yao Yao was stunned for a moment and said, "We haven't said what happened yet." Rich man Tang said resolutely, "If it doesn't work, it won't work. You should give up this idea as soon as possible." Tang Yao Yao looked at him, then looked at Tang Ning and said, "You lose." Tang Ning didn't expect that rich man Tang would be so determined. Hearing this, he shook his head helplessly and said, "I originally thought that it would be better to cooperate with Uncle Tang than to cooperate with others. Since Uncle Tang is not willing, I will go. I'm looking for someone else." "Uncle Tang, don't blame me for not looking for you first." Wait a minute. After Tang Ji was stunned, he stopped him and asked, "What kind of cooperation?" Tang Ning briefly described to him the matter of sponsoring the 16th Guardian competition. Tang Ji finally let go, "So it's not?" Tang Yao Yao asked curiously, "What is it not?" "It's nothing." Tang Ning looked at Tang Ning, his eyes flashed, and said, "You asked me to provide money to help you prepare for the 16th Guards competition, including all the tools and prizes for this competition, all from my Tang family store's things." "They are two Tang families." Tang Ning looked at Tang Yao Yao and said to rich man Tang, "It's your Tang family and our Tang family." In this competition, he and Tang Renzai of Tang Yaja were the chief organizers, and Tang Richmond's Tang family was just taking advantage of them. "What is your Tang family?" "It's a dream." Rich man Tang pulled Tang Yao Yao to his side and corrected, "It's your Tang family and our Tang family." Tang Yao Yao only understood the word dream. She looked at Tang Ning and said, "My father doesn't agree." "You lose." "No, I agree." Tang Ji waved his hand, looked at Tang Ning, and said, "I will do as you say, but you have to promise that no one else will participate in the preparations for this competition except ours." Tang Ning nodded and said, "As I said just now, the wealth should not go to outsiders, so the first thing I thought of was Uncle Tang." Rich man Tang reminded again, "We are outsiders too." Tang Yao Yao was a very strange father. He quickly agreed to big things, but always struggled with these insignificant details. After Tang Ning reached an agreement with him, she was unwilling to argue with him about these small things and left. Tang Yao Yao looked at rich man Tang in confusion and asked, "Dad, why are you?" Rich man Tang waved his hand, looked at her, sighed softly, and said, "Yao Yao, this guy is very smart. A simple girl like you might have been deceived by him at some point, and you still have to count the money for him. But you must be careful about him." "How dare he?" Tang Yao Yao curled her lips and said, "If he dares to lie to me, I will beat him." As soon as Tang Ning returned to her yard, Tang Yao Yao flew over from the wall. She walked to Tang Ning and said, "I lost, what do you want me to do?" Tang Yajiao is willing to admit defeat. She just promised herself one thing, and there is no limit to the scope except that it does not violate morality. This means he can do whatever he wants now. Anything can be done. Tang Ning looked at her, looked up and down, with a smile on her face. She slowly approached her ear and whispered, "I want you." When Tang Yao Yao saw him approaching with a smile, Her face turned slightly red. Thinking of the stories she had read these past few days, her eyelashes trembled in panic, and her beautiful eyes slowly closed. I want you to learn 3 pig sounds. Tang Ning laughed, then looked at her and asked in surprise, why are you blushing? Why do you close your eyes? Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 436. Remember in 1 second, read the wonderful novel for free without pop-up window. Xiaoju sat in the hall, looked at Tang Ning, and asked, what is the plan to make a fortune that you mentioned last time? Bet. Tang Ning looked at him and said, bet that your left cavalry guard will win the 16 guards competition. Bet the left cavalry guard. Xiaoju looked at him as if he was looking at a fool. Tang Ning nodded, bet on the left cavalry guard. Xiaoju looked at him for a long time, and seeing that he was not joking, he said, bet that they will be eliminated in the first game. According to the rules of previous years, unless they are lucky enough to draw the right cavalry guard, they can only win a game. This year you changed the rules. The left cavalry guard is in Group A and the right cavalry guard is in Group B. There is no possibility of winning even one game. Tang Ning waved his hand and said, don't be so discouraged, everything is possible. The 16 guards competition, each guard sent out 100 people to simulate the battlefield. It is not a single soldier's strength, but a teamwork ability and the command ability of the generals. It is not a real fight, so there is no need to fight hard, and the technical content is not that high. However, even so, it is not easy to reverse from the second to last to the first in 2 months. Fortunately, Tang Ning still has Xiao Xiao, who has an almighty master. The old beggar can make the disciples of the beggar gang invincible with a stick in hand. He taught them a few powerful formations and let them practice for 2 months. It is not impossible for them to counterattack. Even if they cannot win the final victory, they will make a lot of money if they make it through the group stage, the semi-finals and the semi-finals. What do you have in mind? Xiaoju looked up at him and said, can you sit down and talk? My neck hurts when I look at you like this. If your neck hurts, stand up. Tang Ning glanced at him and said, I have been sitting for too long today. I don't want to sit now. The reason why he didn't want to sit was naturally not because of this. This was because he didn't know the right person. He actually thought that Tang Yejing would be willing to admit defeat. He just asked her to learn to squeal like a pig 3 times. Is this too much? Compared to some people who would take advantage of girls with ulterior motives, he neither asked her to hug him, nor to kiss him, nor did he ask her to do anything else. He just asked her to squeal like a pig 3 times. Did she have to throw him over her shoulder and ride on him? Xiaoju looked at him and asked tentatively, you were beaten. Was it Miss Tang who did it? Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning with some envy. He rubbed the bruises on his face and sighed, Miss Tang is such a good girl, why don't you know how to cherish her? At least she doesn't hit me in the face. Stop talking nonsense. After his weakness was exposed, Tang Ning looked at him angrily and said, for this competition, I will borrow your place from the cavalry guard. In addition, take me to your place in the next 2 days. I want to see the real strength of the left cavalry guard. It's okay to go and take a look, but I have to go back and report to the general. Xiaoju stood up and walked outside, sighing, a man is bullied by a woman. We are both in the same boat. There is no problem in borrowing the place of the cavalry guard as the competition venue. In previous years, the competition was also concentrated in the camp of a certain guard. The Ministry of War hosted the competition of the 16 guards, so it still has some power. Tang Ning perfected the plan thoroughly and handed it to Lu Ding the next morning. Is it done? Lu Ding looked at him and said, Lord Tang is faster than I thought. Tang Ning reluctantly accepted Lu Ding's compliment, but he frowned when he saw something and said, are you going to reward the winning team with 100 taels of silver for all the soldiers? Lu Ding looked at Tang Ning and thought he must have written it wrong. In the 16 guards competition, each guard, including the generals, had a total of 101 people, and each person was rewarded with 100 taels of silver, which was 10,000 taels. The budget of the Ministry of War was only 2,000 taels. Even if he wrote 10 taels, it occupied half of the budget, which was extremely inappropriate. Tang Ning nodded and said, "The soldiers have worked hard in the competition, so they should be given generous rewards to promote their enthusiasm. As far as I know, many soldiers in the army come from poor families. These rewards are earned through their hard work and are what they deserve." Tang Ning not only prepared the rewards, but also prepared to cast a large copper trophy. Whoever wins the first place in the 16 guards competition will be awarded it. The next time the competition is held, it will be brought back and re-awarded to the winner, making it a symbol of the Tang Grand Cup 16 Guards Championship. Lu Ding looked at him and asked, "The Ministry of War doesn't have that much." Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, Lord Lu, I have already raised the money, and the Ministry of War doesn't need to pay for it." "Raised?" Lu Ding looked at him and asked, "Where did you raise it?" Tang Ning explained, "The owner of Tang Grenzai and the big boss of Tang's Chamber of Commerce are willing to sponsor this 16 guards competition." Lu Ding was stunned and asked, "Aren't you the owner of Tang Grenzai?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "This is what our boss lady wanted." Lu Ding frowned and said, "The 16 guards competition is a very serious matter. How can it be related to businessmen? This is not feasible. You want to let the horse run, but you don't give the horse grass. It's fine if you don't give the grass yourself, but you don't let others give it. What can 2,000 taels of silver do? It's not even enough to pay the bonus. A good cook can't cook without rice. Without silver, Tang Ning can't do this." He looked at Lu Ding and said helplessly, "Mr. Lu, I know the difficulties of the Ministry of War, but you want this competition to be wonderful, but you are stingy with money, and you don't want money donated by others. Please forgive me for this errand. There is nothing the official can do." In fact, even Lu Ding himself felt that his requirements were too harsh for Tang Ning, and even a bit embarrassing. He thought for a moment and said, "I will give you an answer on this matter this afternoon." Royal Study Room. Emperor Chen rarely reviewed the memorial, but stood in the hall, looking down at the jar on the ground. The jar is densely packed with poisonous insects such as centipedes and scorpions, making people's scalp numb just by looking at it. He straightened up, put his hands behind his back, and asked, "Is this goo?" Gong Sun Ying, wearing shackles on his feet and hands, stood aside and said respectfully, "Your Majesty, this is not a poison. These poisonous insects are fighting in the jar. After 7 or 49 days, the remaining one can be called the poison to use it as a poisonous insect. If we take the most poisonous insects around the Dragon Boat Festival, the poisonous insects that are born will also be the most powerful. After the poisonous insects are born, they are nourished with blood. After 7 days, they can be controlled through the art of controlling the poisonous insects." A look of surprise appeared on Chen Huang's face, and he murmured, "There is really such magic in the world." At this time, a eunuch came in from outside and said, "Your Majesty, Mr. Lu Dinglu, the Minister of War, would like to see you." Chen Huang walked up and said, "Let him come in." When Lu Ding walked into the imperial study, only Chen Huang and a few eunuchs were left in the palace. Lu Ding walked to the palace, bowed his hands, and said, "Your Majesty, I have ordered people to formulate new rules for this 16th Guards competition. Please take a look at it. Send it up." After a while, Chen Huang took the book from a eunuch, looked at it carefully, and asked, "Is this new rule formulated by Tang Ning?" Lu Ding said, "Your Majesty is wise, this is indeed formulated by Tang Langzhong." "What is so wise and unwise?" Chen Huang waved his hand and said, "If he hadn't just thought of it, your Ministry of War would have come up with it long ago. Why did you wait until now?" Lu Ding said, I can't make up my mind about this new regulation. Please make a decision, Your Majesty. This is a good idea. Emperor Chen nodded and said, the 16 guards all rely on their own abilities. If they lose again this time, they have nothing to say, so just do as he says. Lu Ding thought for a while and then said, Your Majesty, although this method is wonderful, but to plan it according to this method, more silver will be needed. Tang Langzhong raised the silver from merchants in the capital. Businessman, Chen Huang frowned and said, why do the Ministry of War Affairs have anything to do with businessmen? Lu Ding said, Your Majesty, you don't know. The Ministry of War has just replaced the damaged equipment of the Ministry of War with new ones. It has cost a lot of money. We really can't get any more money. In that case, let's allocate money from the treasury. Emperor Chen waved his hand and asked, how much do you want? Lu Ding said, initial estimate, 50,000 taels. Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, what did Lu Iking just say? Back to Your Majesty, the preparation for this competition is initially estimated to require 50,000. Not this sentence, the previous sentence. The Ministry of War has just replaced the damaged equipment of the Ministry of War with new ones, and it is really hard to get them out. One more sentence. Lu Ding was stunned and said, Mr. Tang raised money from merchants in the capital. Chen Huang nodded and said, although Tang Iking's method is somewhat inappropriate, it is also for the sake of the national treasury. His intentions are commendable, and I am sure. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 437. I just went into the palace. His Majesty has agreed to your idea. We can use merchants to prepare for this competition. Before leaving the court, Lu Ding came back from the palace and told Tang Ning the news. In this way, the Tang Grand Cup 16 Guards Championship has been finalized. As long as Emperor Chen agrees, Tang Ning can let go. But Lu Ding changed his tone and said, the 16 Guards competition is related to the dignity of the court. Even if there are some changes compared to previous years, there must be a limit. The most important thing is still the competition itself. Don't lose the big picture for the sake of small things. Tang Ning nodded and said, don't worry, Minister Lu, I know what I'm doing. Lu Ding looked at him, but he didn't know what he was doing. Merchants pursue profits. Even the richest merchants would not take out so much money to help the Ministry of War for no reason. There must be a purpose. However, this matter is already tricky. The Ministry of War can't take out the money, and His Majesty is reluctant to give up the money, so he has to take a step back. No matter what his purpose is, as long as it doesn't delay the competition, it's fine. He looked at Tang Ning. Even though he still felt a little uneasy, he had no choice but to trust him. After Lu Ding left, Tang Ning sat back and continued to refine the plan. It was already early November. The 16 guards would give the final list of the group stage at the latest in mid-December. Tang Ning had divided them into groups based on the comprehensive rankings of previous years and gave them a month to train. In early December, the 4 groups A, B, C, and D would start the internal group stage. Xiaoju's Zozioki guard was a dark horse that he had his eyes on. Unfortunately, this dark horse was still a useless horse. Even Tang Ning was not completely sure that they could improve their strength within a month. In addition, this month would also involve pre-promotion, venue construction, ticket pre-sales, etc. Although not everything needed to be done by him personally, these were unprecedented in the Ministry of War, so he still had to keep an eye on everything. Recalling his past in the Ministry of Revenue, the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Rights, he settled accounts, compiled books, tried unjust cases, and went on diplomatic missions to the state of Chu. Now that he has arrived at the Ministry of War, the most troublesome tasks have also fallen on his shoulders. It can be said that he was born to be busy. After leaving the Yamen, Tang Ning did not delay. Today, he made an appointment with Xiao Ju to visit his Zozioki camp. Tang Ning walked into the courtyard and saw Xiao Xiao and Tang Yao Yao. Humph. Tang Yao Yao was originally talking to Xiao Xiao in the courtyard. When she saw Tang Ning coming in, she snorted coldly and turned her head away. When she was angry, she liked to ignore people. Tang Ning had long been accustomed to it. Xiao Xiao came over, raised her head and looked at him, and whispered, "Brother, did you make Sister Yao Yao angry again?" No. Tang Ning sat down on the stone bench and said, "Xiao Xiao, you should rest for a while before practicing. Brother will teach you a song." Okay. Xiao Xiao sat beside him and blinked at him. Tang Ning looked at Tang Yao Yao, and then sang, "Follow me, let's learn to squeal like pigs, hum 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 hum." Tang Ning only sang 2 sentences of his song, and he couldn't sing any more. Tang Yao Yao grabbed him and took him down, obviously angry. Xiao Xiao looked at them, and then moved away step by step. Tang Yao Yao twisted his arm behind his back and said angrily, "How dare you scold me?" Tang Ning said innocently, "What did I scold you?" Thinking of her hum just now, Tang Yao Yao said angrily, "You called me a pig." "I didn't." "That's what you meant." Women are really unreasonable. They can easily find excuses to accuse someone. Tang Ning saw Xiao Ju standing at the door from the corner of his eye. While watching him being pressed by Tang Yao Yao, he was actually cracking melon seeds. He turned his head to look at Tang Yao Yao and whispered, "Someone is coming, let me go." Tang Yao Yao looked back, glared at him fiercely, and then let him go and flew back to his yard. When there were outsiders around, Tang Yajing still gave him face, so he would never be like a certain Xiao, who was beaten black and blue by a woman in public. Xiao Ju's expression was actually a little disappointed. Tang Ning snatched all his melon seeds and said, "Go to the Zozioki camp." Xiao Ju followed behind him and shook his head and said, "If Lu Ya could be like Miss Tang, she wouldn't be unmarried until now." As a woman, she beat Xiao Ju from childhood to adulthood, and she still agreed to go on a blind date with him. With her hot temper, she didn't beat Xiao Ju to death in the restaurant last time. What else can this be but love? If Xiao Ju could be like Zhao Yuan, maybe he would have married Lu Shangshi's daughter now. This time when he went to the Zioki camp, in addition to Lao Zheng, he also brought 20 beggar gang disciples with him, just to test the strength of the Zioki guards so as to formulate the next plan. Xiao Ju turned his head to look at him and asked, "Did you really accept the job of the 16 guards competition?" Tang Ning said, "Why, is it impossible?" "Not impossible." Xiao Ju shook his head and said, "It's just that the big competition every 4 years is different from the small competition every year. At that time, not only will the officials in the court go to watch, but the court will also invite envoys from the state of Chu and envoys from the western regions. In the early years, even the state of Liang would send people to watch the ceremony. This is a more important event than the grand court meeting. If it is not done well, it will not only lose the face of the court. Do you dare to accept such a job? As long as he is brave, there is no job he dare not take. He is also going to sell tickets for the 16 guards competition. Not only will he sell them himself, but he will also drag the emperor into the water and sell them openly." However, he didn't know that the 16 guards competition was so grand that it was equivalent to a military parade. But a competition is a competition after all, and it is different from a military parade. In the future, we can try to play more tricks, invite other countries to participate, compete in battle formations, horseback archery, short distance running, and so on, and upgrade the 16 guards championship to the Olympic Games. Of course, this is just a preliminary idea at the moment, and it is too difficult to realize. The 16 guards competition alone is enough to keep Tang Ning busy. Xiao Ju seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Do you think the wound on my face has healed?" No, Tang Ning shook his head. It was only a few days since he was beaten, and the bruises on his face would take a few days to disappear at the earliest. Then I won't go. You go by yourself, Xiao Ju said. I'll give you a sign. When you go directly to General Chen Zhonglang. Okay, everyone in the capital knows that you were injured by Lu Ya. Tang Ning waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter whether they can see the wound on your face or not." Xiao Ju sighed and said, "How can there be such a woman in this world? She has bullied me since I was a child, snatched my things, and didn't let me play with other girls. When she fell into the river when she was a child, I saved her. This ungrateful woman." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Does she only bully you?" Xiao Ju thought about it and nodded sadly. In a sense, when boys are young, they always bully a specific girl. They do this not because they hate her, but because they like her, but they don't know how to express this love, so they can only get her attention by bullying her. He wrote about this when he wrote a book a while ago. However, he didn't know if girls were like this too, and he had never seen a girl who used this method to attract attention. Xiao Ju looked at Tang Ning and sighed, "Compared to Lu Ya, Miss Tang is so gentle. You really don't know how to appreciate your blessings." Tang's house, Tang Yao Yao sat in the room, her pretty face full of anger, gritting her teeth. Xiu'er walked in and asked in surprise, "Did he make the young lady angry again?" "I'm so angry." Tang Yao Yao stood up and slapped the table, saying, "He only knows how to make me angry." Xiu'er looked at her and said, "Even if he is angry, he only makes the young lady angry. The young lady should be happy." "Happy?" Tang Yao Yao pinched her knuckles and said, "Next time, I will make him remember this lesson." Xiu'er shook her head and said, "The book says that if a man always bullies a woman, or a woman always bullies a man, it is very likely that they like each other and want to use this method to attract each other's attention." Tang Yao Yao glanced at her and asked, "Where did you see this fallacy?" "This is not a fallacy." Xiu'er shook her head and said, "He wrote it in a book himself." Tang Yao Yao was stunned and asked, "What book?" Xiu'er thought about it and said, "It seems so." Tang Yao Yao looked at her and said suspiciously, "There is this paragraph in the book, why don't I remember it?" Xiu'er said helplessly, "Miss, you always read 10 lines at a glance, of course you don't remember it." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 438. 100 Blade members are training in the back mountain, and a signal flare can call them all back. As the most elite of the Zhou guards, and also the most rigorously trained and hardest working team, there is no doubt about the strength of the sharp blades. Their individual combat capabilities, against ordinary guards, can be 1 against 10. But their greatest strength is their special operations capabilities. Tang Ning tried to adapt them to various extreme environments. After discussing with Lao Zhang, she conducted various targeted training for them to comprehensively improve their overall strength. Of course, Chen Wang's shadow guards should not be underestimated. They are also elite guards and have received special training from Gongsun Ying. They cannot be treated as ordinary opponents. Chen Huang seemed to be very confident in the strength of the shadow guards, and specifically told Tang Ning that this time the competition between the two teams should not be limited to the martial arts field like the 16th Guards competition, which was similar to a performance competition. What he wanted to see was actual combat, the real strength of the two teams, and he chose the venue for the competition on the back hill. The rules of the competition are also very simple. The two teams are divided into 2 groups, red and blue, competing for each other's waste cards. The player who loses the waste card will be eliminated. The winner will be determined based on the total number of waste cards captured by the two teams. Seeing Huang Chen's confident look, Tang Ning couldn't bear to remind him that they had been living in the mountains for half a month without bringing any water or food. Tang Ning's purpose this time was to train them to survive in the wild. Ability. After they came back last night, they had eaten and drank enough to prepare for today's competition. Before the game begins, the two teams are taken to a specific location in the mountain and wait for a signal flare from the camp. A general of the Shadow Guard walked up to Gong Sunying and said, "Report to the leader, our people have been assembled." Gong Sunying glanced at him and said, "In this competition, you can only win, not lose." The general bowed, clasped his fists, and said, "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, another figure ran up to Tang Ning. After standing still, he straightened his body and said loudly, "Report to the general, the sword should reach 100 people." It turned out to be 100 people. "Please give instructions, General." This unexpected loud voice startled Chen Huang. He looked at the sharp blade captain and felt that the aura of this man seemed to be stronger than that of the Shadow Guard, but he was relieved when he thought of the Shadow Guard's special ability. With Huang Chen here, Tang Ning couldn't tell them what to say to the Shadow Guards. She looked at the sharp blade captain and said, "This competition is just a test of your strength by His Majesty. You don't need to work too hard. You can perform normally just fine." The captain cupped his fists and said, "Take the order." Tang Ning didn't know if he understood what he said. Anyway, he felt that he had said it very straightforwardly. The two teams have set off, and Chen Huang is sitting firmly in the central barracks, looking confident. Tang Ning was just the opposite. He had very little confidence, not in the blade, but in the Shadow Guard. With Chen Huang's cautious attitude, Tang Ning was really unsure whether he would praise him or blame him if Sharp Blade really won. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "You don't need to be upset. Even if Sharp Blade loses, I won't blame you. You can make Zhou Xiaoyi, who is at the bottom of the 16th Guards, jump to the top of the 16th Guards. You deserve the most credit." Tang Ning cupped her hands and said politely, "Thank you for the compliment, Your Majesty. This is all the credit of all the soldiers." Chen Huang stood up and said, "This competition only lasts a few days. I'm afraid we won't be able to tell the winner. I'm going back to the palace first. When the time comes, just send me the results. Farewell to Your Majesty." After sending Huang Chen out of the Zioki camp and watching the ceremony go away, Tang Ning looked towards the back mountain and asked, "Is it time?" Xiaoju nodded and said, "That's almost it." Tang Ning looked behind her, and Chen Zhou took out a bamboo tube from his sleeve and lit the fuse. A dazzling white light shot straight into the sky and exploded high in the sky, making a huge noise. After a while, the same loud noise came from the mountain as a response to the start of the competition. According to Chen Huang, this competition is a real battle rather than a performance, and the time is not limited. It is not an easy task to eliminate everyone in the Shadow Guard in the mountains. Xiaoju looked at Tang Ning and asked, "What should we do now?" "Wait. Just wait here." Tang Ning looked at him and said, "There is still something to do with the staff department. I have to go back to the Yamen. If anything happens, just ask someone to come to the staff department and notify me." He walked a few steps and thought of something again. He looked at Xiaoju and asked, "In the imperial court, among the senior officials above the 4th rank, which ones are from Jiangnan?" "That's too much," Xiaoju said without even thinking. "There are many talented people in Jiangnan. Over the years, even the students from Jiangyi have been suppressed by them in the imperial examination. Over the years, many important officials in the court are from Jiangnan. For example, Prime Minister Feng, Zhang Zongshuling, Minister of Industry and so on. Jiangnan is an important place for taxation and education. The status of Jiangnan officials in the court is unbreakable." Tang Ning has some confidence in this, but obviously, the real situation is more serious than he imagined. Xiaoju thought for a while and then said, "By the way, when it comes to Jiangnan, the Tang family has the greatest influence in Jiangnan." Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Isn't the Tang family a high-ranking family in Jiangyi?" Xiaoju shook his head and said, "You don't know that although the Tang family's roots are in the capital, most of the Tang family's children marry women from Jiangnan wealthy families. The Tang family has a very close relationship with them. Otherwise, you would think that who is behind the scenes to provide such huge financial support to the Tang family and Prince Duan." This matter was actually something Tang Ning had always wondered about. Many of the powerful people that King Kong relied on all had huge businesses, but the Tang family, which King Duan relied on, rarely got involved in business. Even if Tang Ning wanted to attack, she couldn't find a target. After working on it for a long time, it turns out that the Tang family's source of income lies in Jiangnan. It seemed that the pool of officialdom was much deeper than he thought. When he returned to the official headquarters, in the mountains behind the Zioki camp, the Sharp Blade and Shadow Guard teams were not in a hurry to take action, but were discussing tactics on the spot. The camps of the two teams are several miles apart, and they are only temporary camps. After starting the operation, they must be abandoned, otherwise they will be waiting for the other party to come and encircle them. In a certain clearing in the mountain forest, the Shadow Guard general divided 100 people into 10 groups of 10 people each. Then he called the 10 captains over and warned. The leader said, "This battle can only be won, not defeated. We must not lose to people like Zhou Xiaoyi. Take orders. Take orders. Take orders." Everyone spoke one after another, and the general waited for everyone to calm down and said, "We are the Shadow Guards. We don't have to confront them head on. Whether we use poison or poison, just make sure we win." A forest several miles away. A young man squatted on the tree, looked at the people below, and said, "The general said, those guys will make some heresy, so I am very energetic. If anyone hinders the Sharp Blade, I will kill him, who will be taken out and trained alone for a month." One person looked up at him and asked, "Boss, what did General Tang just say to you?" The general said, "Let us perform normally without working too hard." The young man looked at them and said, "Although the general said this, it is just a comfort. You all cheer up and use all your abilities. Do it all, remember, this is not a drill." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 439. The 437th chapter of the main text of Ruyi Xiaolang Jun. It's a good loss, only 20 people came out of the 100 people of the left cavalry guard. Tang Ning didn't say anything, and said to a beggar gang disciple behind him, "You go." General Chen Zhonglang looked at him and asked, "I wonder what weapons your guards need." The beggar gang disciples don't have to fight in the battlefield, they all learn stick techniques, and later they entered the Tang mansion as guards, and then they turned to learn swords. For now, their most powerful skill is still the stick formation. This is a military camp, with many weapons and a full range of types. They all chose the eyebrow-high stick. This kind of stick is only used for daily exercises, and almost no one can use it on the battlefield. But today is just a competition, not a fight. The 20 people of the cavalry guard also use wooden weapons. These are also used in the real competition. At that time, white powder will be applied on the weapons, and those who are stabbed in the vitals will be eliminated. The two camps were arranged at the two ends of the martial arts arena. General Chen looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Can we start?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "Let's start." General Chen waved his hand, and someone beat the war drum. The drum sounded for a while, and with the sound of a gong, it indicated that the competition officially began. 20 people from the left cavalry guard rushed over together, 10 of them were the first, and 5 people were on each side. On the other hand, the 20 beggars' sect disciples were not in a hurry. Everyone held a stick with both hands, leaning forward, and spread out to form a strange standing position. Outsiders could not see any clues about this formation. It seemed scattered, but it was actually a clever and flexible formation. It could form a formation of 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, and up to 10 people. These 20 people were 2 mobile formations, and they could switch formations at any time according to the enemy's offensive. General Chen Zhonglang was just watching comfortably at first, but when he saw these beggars' sect disciples put up this formation, his face began to change a little. Although he still didn't find anything strange, he had lived in the military for a long time, and his intuition told him that these 20 guards were not ordinary people. When the 20 cavalry guards rushed forward in a certain formation, a beggar gang disciple in the front shouted, 3, 3, 4. As soon as he finished speaking, the first 10-man formation was quickly split into 2 3-man formations and 1 4-man formation. Before the cavalry guards in the front could react, stick shadows appeared on their upper, middle, and lower paths. Bang! The bodies of the 3 people flew out directly. If it was a real competition, they would have been eliminated at this moment. The bodies of the other 7 people stagnated and did not react. Another voice came from the front. 3 talents and 7 stars. The 10 beggar gang disciples changed their formation again, 3 defense and 7 attack. The remaining 7 cavalry guards were neither defense nor attack, and they immediately became flustered. As for the 5 people on the left and right wings, they had already been captured by the beggar gang disciples who were divided into 2 5-element formations. In just one encounter, the 20 cavalry guards were defeated. Not only did the onlookers stare in amazement, but even General Chen Zhonglang showed a look of shock on his face. He realized at this moment that these guards cooperated closely with each other, their formations were flexible and varied, and they combined offense and defense. They seemed scattered, but in fact they were a whole. They could easily concentrate the most fierce attacks on one point. If the opponent wanted to break through any point of them, they would face the whole of 20 people. The captain who had boasted just now was already dumbfounded. When he came to his senses, his face changed drastically and he gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go together." 20 people against 80 people, surrounded on all sides, but Tang Ning was not panicked at all. The disciples of the beggar gang all started from scratch. Although everyone's strength was not high, they were good at the art of combined attack. The gap of 3 times with the enemy was not their limit. General Chen Zhonglang stood aside, and the more he watched, the more frightened he became. The formation of these 20 people is really amazing. Even though they have 4 times the combat power, they can't defeat them for a while, and people are constantly eliminated. From the beginning, they completely dominate the rhythm of the competition. Judging from their performance, they are definitely not fierce generals, and they rely on this formation. This shows that what they can do, the cavalry guard can also do, and they can even do better. If the cavalry guard can also learn this formation, what is the golden feather guard, what is the Yulin guard, even if they are added together, they are not the opponent of the cavalry guard. From now on, the position of the head of the 16 guards will be replaced. Facing a number 4 times theirs, although the beggar gang disciples were not defeated, it was much more difficult than before. 2 people have been eliminated, but at the same time, the 80 people of the cavalry guard are now only 60. It's incredible. Watching the 20 people continue to decrease, but the elimination speed of the cavalry guard is more than 10 times theirs. Until there is no cavalry guard on the field, the opponent still has 5 people standing in formation on the martial arts field. General Chen Zhonglang was shocked and couldn't help but speak. It would be fine if the guards were all extraordinary. It is said that there are some powerful masters in the world who can fight against 100 people without losing. But the problem is that they are all ordinary people, but they can do this, which is a miracle. He looked at Tang Ning and said, "We lost." Tang Ning smiled and said, "It's good to lose. Only those who are not favored can be regarded as dark horses. The weaker the cavalry guards, the higher the odds, and the more they earn. Who would have a problem with money?" General Chen Zhonglang was stunned and said uncertainly, "It's good to lose." Xiaoju walked up to the group of dejected cavalry guards and asked calmly, "Are you convinced?" Including the captain, all the cavalry guards lowered their heads, blushing and speechless. As imperial guards, 100 people could not beat 20 people. If it got out, they would really have no face at all. But they not only lost, but also lost sincerely. The other party did not use any conspiracy or cheating. They defeated them in a fair and square manner. They had no choice but to accept it. Xiaoju looked at them and asked again, "Do you want to win?" Someone whispered, "Yes." Xiaoju said in a deep voice, "Speak louder, I can't hear you." Yes, this time, more people spoke. Xiaoju glanced at them and asked, "You can't beat them? Is it because you didn't eat breakfast this morning? Do you want to compete again after you are full?" The cavalry guards were already ashamed. After being stimulated by Xiaoju, they breathed quickly and their faces flushed. Xiaoju looked at them and said, "In this competition for the 16 guards, if you can make it to the A group, each of you will be awarded 10 taels of silver. If you can win the first place in the competition, each of you will be awarded 100 taels of silver." When they heard the 100 taels, many people in the field were red-eyed. Among the imperial guards, except for the generals, most of them were from the poor. 100 taels of silver was enough to cover their military pay for 3 years. Xiaoju looked at them again and asked, "Now tell me, do you want to win?" "Yes. Yes. Yes." Everyone almost roared, and the sound resounded throughout the camp, making people's eardrums hurt. Tang Ning didn't expect that Xiao Xiaogongyi, who was so weak that he was beaten by a woman and had to put foundation on his face to cover the wound, actually had such a method. The morale of the cavalry guards was greatly boosted by his encouragement. Morale is very important for an army. If they can have such morale before the competition, the result of the competition may change. 100 cavalry guards went to training as if they were pumped with chicken blood. Xiaoju walked to Tang Ning and said proudly, "How is it?" Tang Ning looked at him and reminded him, "Go back and fix your makeup first, it's all gone." Xiaoju's face changed slightly. He went back to the tent to fix his foundation and reminded Tang Ning, "Don't tell anyone about this. It was all forced by the situation. It was okay for a man to put on foundation." Tang Ning said casually, "Isn't it just foundation? Some people even wear women's clothes. This doesn't mean anything." Xiaoju was stunned, "Who wears women's clothes?" "It's not important." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone that Xiao Xiaogong put powder on his face." Xiaoju looked at him and asked, "Who is wearing women's clothes?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 440. Remember it in 1 second and read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. It doesn't matter who wears women's clothes. What's important is that through today's competition, Tang Ning has a certain understanding of the strength of the cavalry guards. In the past few days, he plans to visit other guards. Knowing himself and the enemy, he can win every battle. In addition, the competition venue for the Zioki camp needs to be built as soon as possible. It is impossible to build it indoors. If it is outdoors, the amount of work will be much less, the investment will be small, and the return will be high. I wonder if I can apply to transfer some people from the Ministry of Works. I can save a little. Xiaoju touched up the makeup on his face and went back with him. The Zioki camp was not far from the city and he didn't stay at the camp at night. After entering the city, he seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly looked at Tang Ning and said, "I won't go back now. I'll go to your house for a drink." It looked like there was something or someone in Xiao's house that made him afraid. Before Tang Ning could ask, he took the initiative to explain, "Lu Ya often goes to my house to drink with my father. Now I might meet her. This woman repays kindness with hatred. I saved her, but she always beat me. Is it better to avoid her if you can, avoid? Tang Ning didn't care about this. Maybe he would go to Xiao Mansion to hide for a while. Tang Yao Yao started to practice diligently a long time ago. She has absolute control over Tang Grenzai's wine shop, and she also holds the old beggar's lifeline. One is related to inheritance, and the other is related to fine wine. Xiao Xiao and Tang Yao Yao have control over the old beggar. The most important thing is to teach them, and no effort is spared. If one day he offends Tang Yao Yao again, there will still be a place to hide. There seemed to be guests at home today. Tang Ning walked to the yard and saw a group of warblers and swallows. Xiao Ruxiayi, Tang Yao Yao and others were all there. Zhao Man also came over. Next to her was Princess Anyang. Princess Anyang. Tang Ning didn't recognize the woman next to her. You go to my study first, and I'll get the wine. Tang Ning turned around and said something, and found that Xiao Ju, who was standing next to him just now, had disappeared. He walked to the yard. Xiao I came over, pointed at the strange woman and said, "Ms. Sir, let me introduce to you, this is." Tang Ning asked, "Could this be Miss Lu Yalu?" Zhong Yi looked at him and said in surprise, "My husband knows Sister Lu." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I guess." Lu Ya came over, saluted Tang Ning, and said, "I heard my father talk about Mr. Tang and his trip to Chu. Thank you Mr. Tang for taking care of Lu Tang. We are all colleagues, we just take care of each other." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "You guys chat, I have something else to do." This Miss Lu looked quite gentle, completely different from the ferocious demeanor that Xiao Ju had described to him. Sure enough, hearing was believing and seeing was believing. Xiao Ju just came close to describing her as eating human flesh and drinking people. Bloody witch. Princess Anyang is indeed the most famous socialite in Kyoto. Since Zhao Man moved here, she has come here more frequently, which makes Xiru and Xiaoi less bored. They can get to know more ladies in Beijing and gradually integrate into the circle. Tang Ning would not interfere with their women's affairs. He still had many things to do. Although the previous 16th Guards competition was very popular, it was only limited to the upper-class circles. Ordinary people could not come into contact with it, and it did not create much topic among the people. Before December, he still needs to turn this matter into a major event that attracts everyone's attention in Beijing, so that his tickets can be sold. In the pavilion in the courtyard, Princess Anyang looked at Lu Ya and said, "I just saw Xiao Ju." Lu Ya glanced in the direction of the door and said, "I saw it too. It seems that you guys are really not suitable for each other." Princess Anyang sighed and said, "He has never been so afraid of anyone. How about I introduce you to some other young talents?" Lu Ya rolled her eyes at her and asked, "Is there anyone else in the capital who is willing to marry me?" Princess Anyang was speechless for a moment. The daughter of Lu Ding, Minister of the Ministry of War, was well known for her surly temperament. Indeed, no young talent was willing to jump into this pit of fire. They even changed their expressions after hearing Lu Ya, and they were all waiting for someone to marry them. She saved them from suffering, and this kind of fame was achieved by Lu Ya punching Xiao Ju one after another. She looked at Lu Ya and asked in surprise, "Do you really like Xiao Ju?" Lu Ya gritted her teeth and said, Lu Ya, will never marry except him in this life." Princess Anyang wondered, "Why is this?" Lu Ya said, "Do you still remember the time we went to Nanhu to play when you were a kid?" Princess Anyang thought for a while and said, "You mean that time that winter, when you had to go to play on the ice, you stepped on the ice and fell into the lake?" Lu Ya nodded and said, "Everyone was scared away that time, but he was the only one willing to jump down and rescue me. From that time on, I thought that I must marry him in the future. I remember that he fell seriously ill after returning home, but Mr. Xiao was so anxious that he went to the palace overnight to ask for an imperial doctor. A look of memory appeared on Princess Anyang's face, and then she looked at her in surprise and said, "Then why have you bullied him since childhood? Isn't this just repaying kindness with hatred?" Lu Ya looked at her and asked, "If I didn't bully him, what would be the difference between me and other people? He might have forgotten me long ago." Princess Anyang looked at her and was speechless for a moment. At this moment, she remembered a book she had read not long ago. The book said that when they were young, some boys would bully little girls to attract their attention. She did not expect that women were also like this, and not only when I was young. Tang Yao Yao stood aside, listening to the conversation between the two, with a thoughtful expression on her face. Tang Ning was sitting in the study, making some preparations before the competition started. Among the 16 guards, only the Yulin guards and the Golden Feather guards have some presence. The others don't have any impressive achievements. They usually don't show up. The common people can't even name the 16 guards. As the imperial army that protects the safety of the capital, they need to be known to more people, and more people need to know about this 16th guards competition. He decided to let Tang Renzai publish a few albums, introduce the 16th guards in detail, and then post the rankings of the competition in the past 10 years to give them a reference. After all, major gambling houses will definitely issue handicaps by then. The data is of great reference value to the majority of gamblers. However, he doesn't know much about these yet and needs to go to the Ministry of War tomorrow to check some information. He had just stood up, planning to take a shower, when he saw Tang Yao Yao walking in from the door. Tang Ning looked up at her and asked, "Is something wrong?" Tang Yao Yao waved his hand and said, "It's nothing wrong. If it's okay, I'll go take a shower." "Wait a minute." Tang Yajing stopped him and asked, "I have a question to ask you." Tang Ning looked at her and asked, "What's the problem?" Tang Yajiao swayed on the spot with her hands behind her back. After thinking for a long time, she asked, "Of all the protagonists you have written, which one do you most want to be?" Tang Ning asked in surprise, "Why do you ask this?" Tang Yao Yao said impatiently, "If I ask you, just tell me, mother-in-law and mother." Tang Ning thought for a while and decided not to talk about those ghost stories. They were too illusory. Most of them had miserable life experiences and plot twists. Tang Ning didn't like to torment herself. Among the remaining ones, most of them are Jin Yang's martial arts. Guo Jing died for his country. Tang Ning still wants to enjoy his old age. Naturally, he doesn't want to be Guo Jing. Yang Guo, this is not to be considered. Zhang Wuji's life experience is too miserable and he is also a virgin. Tang Ning didn't like it very much. Ling Huchang's reasons for not considering it were similar to Yang Guo's. After thinking about it, it seems that only one person is the happiest. He looked at Tang Yao Yao and said, "Wei Xiaobao. Fortunate young gentleman." Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 441. People will always grow up. When I was a child, I read Jin Yang and always wanted to become a martial arts hero like Guo Jing and Yang Guo. When you grow up, you will find that Wei Xiaobao is actually the real winner in life. Find a paradise and spend the rest of your life with your lovely wife and concubine. At this point in your life, what more could you want? Wei Xiaobao. Tang Yao Yao narrowed her eyes at him and asked, "Then you plan to marry 7 wives like him?" "That's not true." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I'm very satisfied now." Tang Yao Yao looked at him with satisfaction. After thinking about it carefully, her expression became dissatisfied again. Tang Ning didn't know what was going on in Tang Yao Yao's little head all day long. Her expression changed as quickly as flipping through a book. She walked in and asked him a question. After getting his answer, she felt a little happy at first, and then walked away angrily. He shook his head. "Women, there is another name called contradiction." He walked out of the room and asked Qing Er to prepare bath water for him. After taking a bath, he would go over to discuss with Tang Yaoyao about the pre-publicity for the 16th Guards competition. Starting from the 6th day of winter, Tang Grenzai, the largest bookstore in Beijing, began to publish something called newspaper. This kind of newspaper is different from a book. It only has a thin page, but its format is several times the size of an ordinary book. The book list that Tang Grenzai will publish soon occupies 20% of the page. The recruitment notices of many Tang Grenzai stores occupy nearly 30%. The remaining 2 pages briefly introduce the origin of the 16 guards and their respective roles, responsibilities, and attached the ranking of Ziobi of the 16th guards 10 years ago. The newspaper cost 1 penny a copy, which was very cheap. 1,000 copies were printed on the first day and were sold out within half an hour. Only a few people were interested in Tang Grenzai's published books and recruitment notices, but the introduction and ranking of 16th guards attracted the attention of many people. The quadrennial competition of the 16th guards is about to begin. Many people have already focused on this important event, but they do not know the strength of the 16th guards. The newspaper published by Tang Grenzai just provides them with a reference. The common people didn't know much about the 16th guards before. This newspaper made them realize that the reason why the people in the capital lived a stable life was because of these people who guarded them. 3 days after the newspaper was published, frequent people in the streets and alleys began to let's discuss the matter of the 16th guards competition. Tang Yaoyao walked out of Tang Grenzai, looked at Tang Ning and asked, "This kind of newspaper can't make much money, so why do you spend so much effort on it?" Tang Ning smiled and said, "I won't be able to explain it for a while. Anyway, just wait to receive the money." Of course Tang Yaji didn't understand the importance of public opinion. Tang Ning deliberately kept the price of the newspaper to the lowest level. The profit was only about the same as the cost. Although it was not profitable, it could guarantee that any common person could buy it, even if they only bought 1 copy. By circulating it to each other, his purpose will be achieved. In just a few days, the 16 guards competition has already become a hot topic of discussion among the people. After that, Tang Grenzai will devote a section to introducing the 16th guards every day. After the competition starts, a banner will be erected at the entrance of Tang Grenzai. Brand, points, and rankings are updated at any time until the end of the competition. After the great competition, the people were almost accustomed to the existence of newspapers. After that, they mainly focused on major news that happened in the capital or the country. The people in the capital had a very high sense of national identity and pride, and were very concerned about such things. In addition, Zioki Camp has begun to build a site. In fact, the main task is to enclose the land. The amount of work is not large and it can be put into use in 1 month. For Tang Ning, the most difficult thing now is how to convince Chen Huang to allow him to sell tickets. He cannot decide this matter privately. He wrote a letter and handed it over yesterday, but there is no news yet. He took a break today and went shopping with Tang Yaoyao. As soon as he returned home, he saw Ling Yun standing in the courtyard. When he saw him coming in, he stepped forward and said, "Master Tang, His Majesty announces your admission to the palace." When Emperor Chen announced his entry into the palace this time, he was probably talking about the tickets for the 16th Guards competition. Tang Ning got on the carriage, while Ling Yun rode in front. The Ling family is also a family of military generals. If you really think about it, they should be the most prominent generals in the capital today. Ling Yun is not much older than Lu Teng and Xiaoju, but he is already the general of the Yulin Guard, often accompanying Emperor Chen. The Ling family is not like the Lu family, who took the civil service route in the middle. The current head of the Ling family is Ling Yun's father. Is General Jin Yue. The other heirs are not in the capital, but are accumulating military exploits on the border. There are no generals in the capital who are better than the Ling family. When Tang Ning was about to enter the carriage, she saw rich man Tang coming out of his home. She couldn't pretend not to see him, so she raised her hand and greeted him, "Hello, Uncle Tang." Tang Ji originally didn't want to say hello to Tang Ning, but now that he had spoken, he had no choice but to wave his hand and ask casually, "Where are you going?" Tang Ning was surprised that rich man Tang would actually talk to him. She was stunned for a moment before saying, "Your Majesty has summoned me." Tang Ji's eyes stayed on Ling Yun's face for a moment, and suddenly asked, "Who is this?" Tang Ning introduced, "Commander Ling Yun Ling." Ling Yun looked at him and said, "Master Tang, it's time for us to leave. Don't keep your Majesty waiting." Tang Ning waved to rich man Tang again and said, "Goodbye, Uncle Tang." Tang Ji stood there for a long time, watching the carriage disappear. The butler behind him took a step forward and whispered, "Master, aren't you going to the Red Sleeve Pavilion?" Tang Ji was a little confused, waved his hand and said, "Let's go." In the imperial study, Emperor Chen took a newspaper in his hand and said, "Newspapers are new, but if they are only sold for 1 penny, I'm afraid they can't even make back their capital. Won't he lose money?" He put the newspaper down and said, "Why sell tickets for the 16 guards competition? It's already a special case to let merchants participate, but he actually wants to make a profit from it. I want to see how he explains it to me." Not long after he finished speaking, an eunuch came forward to report that Tang Ning had arrived. Emperor Chen looked over and said, "Let him in." Tang Ning walked into the hall, bowed and said, "Your Majesty." Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, "How are the preparations for the 16 guards competition going?" Tang Ning said, "Your Majesty, everything is going in order." Emperor Chen spoke again, then explained to me, "What is the matter with the tickets for this competition?" Tang Ning had already prepared for this question before coming, and said, "Your Majesty, I know that the silver in the treasury is hard to come by, and there are too many places where silver is needed. There are droughts in the north, floods in the south, and the Sushan people have repeatedly violated the border, which is a huge cost. 16 Wei holds a small competition every year and a big competition every 4 years, which costs a lot. However, compared with disaster relief, fighting foreign enemies, and protecting the country and the people, it is really a trivial matter. I dare not add more pressure to the national treasury, so I try to persuade the wealthy merchants in Beijing to donate silver to prepare for the competition and save money for the national treasury. I also think of selling tickets for the competition. 30% of the proceeds will go to the Ministry of War, 30% will be collected by the National Treasury, and the rest will be returned to the merchants who organized the competition, which also shows that the court is sympathetic. If you want to persuade others, it is best to start from the interests of others and say that I do all this for your own good. Of course, before that, you must first understand what the other party needs and likes. This is called catering to their needs." According to Tang Ning's understanding of Emperor Chen, if he can lower his bottom line once for silver, he can lower it a second time, and he is not doing it for his own interests, but standing from the perspective of the court, the national treasury, and Emperor Chen, representing selfless justice. The silver is already in front of him, the only question is whether he wants to do it. Who would have a problem with silver, even if he was the emperor? Tang Ning raised his head and looked over. Judging from the somewhat interested expression on Emperor Chen's face, he guessed right this time, and there was a high possibility that there would be no need for bargaining.